This is going to be a simple application which generates a QR code based on the input string and saves it to a PNG file. Despite its simplicity, we'll be able to have a look at the application's general composition, use of external open source libraries. It will have a very primitive makefile and the basic but functional code. We'll also work with Git. We're going to use C++. I'll be using Ubuntu as Linux is very convenient for software development, especially if you try to do some development for embedded software. It's wise to divide application into separate modules, which will be responsible for a specific isolated task whenever possible, no matter which language you use. And in my opinion, it's better to start to think over any application from a top-level approach without going too much into detail at the beginning. Doing so will help break the code into separate functional parts. It will not save us from refactoring sometime later. Refactoring, rewriting application code for better clarity, flexibility, or reliability, happens continuously as there is never a code completely satisfying all the conditions in a complex case. The module containing main should just start the application itself without knowing anything about what is inside. It is useful as it may allow to build various applications using shared code. We'll pass our input parameters to the application layer, which will parse them and decide if we presented the input parameters in a way the application understands them and if our parameters are within expected limits. It will print help header if those parameters do not match what it actually expects. Once the application layer has a chance to successfully parse the input data, we'll call our logic to the actual job. First of all, we'll have a look at the QR codes. They will have a size and error correction, which helps reader restore the data if the image is noisy, which may happen when we try to scan a QR code from a jammed paper as an example. It's good to remember that the higher error correction, the smaller useful information might be encoded by the symbols, hence a workaround between the correction size and the length of data is inevitable. It's like one decided either to have an overseas trip and buying another car, and if you want to have both, then you might consider buying a used car and have an overseas trip on a budget. Not a bad idea overall. So, using the external libraries is always a great idea, as why would someone invent a wheel? But check the project requirements and licenses first, especially if you want to sell it later. Not that someone might ask how much someone would pay for a very basic and primitive utility generated a QR code and save it into a PNG file in our time, of course. But it could be a small part of a bigger project, doing something really useful and getting you closer to something what you want to achieve. Debugging is an essential part of any development, and we'll be using standard output like cout or cerr. Please note, it's not recommended to use it directly in real-life development. It's recommended to wrap the output with a special login code, which will have different levels of output, and the actual output may be directed to different logical and physical output devices, be it a COM port or Ethernet or a display or something else. But we'll stick to those functions for simplicity at the moment. The library generating QR code will output an array of Boolean values, which corresponds to different pixels of the actual QR code picture. We will turn it into a monochrome image in RAM consisting of 32-bit words, RGBA, which stands for red, blue, green colors, and A for alpha, which determines the transparency to ensure the PNG library would understand that information. White color, all the three color components will be equal to FF, and for the black color, they will all be set to zeros. Alpha channel will be set to FF as we do not want to deal with transparency in our situation. You can play with different color palettes to test the output image. It's worth noting the QR code will be square. Scaling is another peculiarity we should consider. You see, the QR code generates a Boolean value for a pixel, and if we turn that into a QR picture directly, the output image will be too small and unusable. Let's make it bigger in both dimensions, but then hide by 8 times. Empirically, it ensures the proper image size, but scaling can also be made as one of the input parameters, of course. Next step, we'll be using the PNG library to generate the PNG image. This part is much more concise and is basically calling of a single function, where the pointer to memory containing the QR code image is passed. And don't forget the file name, of course.